Hi, everyone. Harry here. There is a steady and rising drumbeat from the federal courts really calling out the administration in these immigration cases, not simply for not complying with the law, but more and more for being squirrely, you might say, or flat out dishonest, you might say, and you have judges increasingly angry. I think we've reached a new level with Judge Murphy in Massachusetts, and there was a hearing yesterday where he absolutely excoriated the administration and basically said, they are lying sacks. Let me set it up a little, but the real headline here is how, perhaps emboldened by other courts or, district courts and Supreme Court affirmances, you really have a large corpus now of district courts. There's one in Pittsburgh that kind of went only halfway, or it's partly for Trump, a Trump appointee. But man, oh man, it is a real basic chorus of voices totally taking the administration to task. Okay, Murphy has a different kind of case that's in the overall Alien Enemies Act classes of deportations. It involves proposed deportations to so-called third-party countries. These are people who cannot go back to where they were for any of several reasons, perhaps a well-founded fear of prosecution, perhaps the country where they were doesn't want them anymore. And so the U.S. proposes to transfer them to a third country, and not just any third country. In its basic, cruel, nasty, do anything you can to treat immigrants as subhuman, the U.S. wants to send them to a detention center in South Sudan. South Sudan's the youngest country in the world. It's almost stretching it to call it a country. It's completely war-torn. It's completely a mess. And its detention center, commensurately is just like a lawless place where all kinds of terrible behavior just goes on daily and unpunished. In that sense, it's sort of the twin of CCOT in El Salvador, where they sent all these folks, and it's as sort of a high-tech modern version of a torture chamber. This is a low-tech version, and it's specifically members of the European Union and the U.S. You've used it as a place to kind of deter people from then proceeding on to the West, just because it's such a hellhole and you can't get process and the like. Okay. Murphy, a few weeks ago, established a putative class of people who were going to be sent to South Sudan, who were arguing, at least, that they might have a well-founded fear of prosecution, and they at least wanted notice and opportunity to be heard. And Murphy said, give them notice and opportunity to be heard. And notice means, under the law, notice that they can understand and interpret her and the like. So what did the U.S. do? Of course, they gave them a piece of paper in English that they didn't understand, at least some of the ones here, and they ushered them onto a plane, boom, right away. At which point, the lawyers for them rushed into court before Murphy and said, stop the music, look what's going on here. And we have a fairly dramatic kind of juncture in this case, because these 12 or 13, it would appear, deportees are all on a plane still, the U.S. plane, which is sitting on the tarmac on its way to South Sudan, out of this country, but still, because they're in the U.S. plane, subject to his jurisdiction. And so Murphy said, totally furious at the U.S. He had said before, I won't enter this injunction because I've ordered in my preliminary injunction you give reasonable notice. This is not reasonable notice. It's in English. You've given them no time, and you have violated my preliminary injunction. And as a separate point here, he's basically come within an inch of finding them in contempt for violating. And what does contempt mean? It means criminal contempt. Civil contempt means you're entering an order designed to make somebody comply. You pay this or go to jail until such time as you comply. Criminal contempt means you violated my order. That's a crime. Now, there's real possibility we're going to see that in Boasberg's court. We haven't yet. And it will give rise to a really tricky, vexing question that you can be sure the administration will jump up and down about and take to a court of appeals, because you got to do something that's meaningful. So what do? Maybe you try to find out the very officer who you can charge with violating the order, but the administration's going to be squirrely and say, he did it, nobody did it. And then impose criminal penalties, including a jail sentence, right? Or something that is meaningful. This is under the inherent judicial authority, but something that is meaningful to penalize and deter future criminal contempt. So that's going to be, I think he will find criminal contempt, but how then it'll work? Will he need discovery to figure out how it'll work? Will the administration oppose and try to keep from answering discovery at all costs, saying it's state secrets and the like? That's a big drama in the future. The drama in the present that played out yesterday was his basically taking them to task in a fashion. I would say both Boasberg and Zinnes, who's got Abrego Garcia's case, have been firm, but pretty decorous, pretty judicial. Murphy was pissed off, and he really beat up the DOJ attorney. And he said, this looks like criminal contempt to me. I'll figure out what to do about that later. In the meantime, here's my order. I want these guys back. And they're right now on a tarmac. Now, the administration has hand chosen these 12 or 13 deportees to be really nasty customers. They have committed violent bad crimes in the U.S., but totally served their sentences for it. So they've paid their debts to society, as it were. But they've chosen them so they can carry on a kind of war of words and a propaganda campaign to the American people, saying, these are the worst of the worst and we're trying to get rid of them, and these judges are keeping us from doing it. And so they've said things like, we're removing these convicted criminals so they can't hurt another American victim. It is absurd that an activist judge is trying to force the United States to bring back these uniquely barbaric monsters, blah, 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 blah. Of course, that completely ignores what they have to do, which is give them meaningful notice, which they declined to do, even though they were ordered to do, and which the worst, nastiest person on U.S. soil is entitled to under due process rights and the ruling of the Supreme Court. So it's just a complete smokescreen to say these guys are terrible and dangerous. Fine, bring them back, keep them detained. They can't hurt anyone. And again, they have served their time. And give them notice and let them go through the immigration system and have a judge say, are they subject to South Sudan? Are they not? Etc. So in that sense, it's a very kind of low level, campaign, by the U.S. to, try to say, well, since they're dangerous, we don't have to follow the law. Courts won't go for that, but the U.S., I think, knows it's really losing the war of words. 85%, I know I keep coming back to that figure, but 85% of American citizens don't agree on anything, on what time of day it is, but they all agree that when courts make orders, the administration should follow them. So their gambit here is to say, but these are the nastiest of the nasty. The nastiest of the nasty are covered by Murphy's order that simply says, give them notice that's reasonable, not minutes, and that can be understood, not just in English. So they violated it. He is fit to be tied. He really slaps them around in court. And now he has the ability to order them. They are still under his jurisdiction. He is so ruled anyway. The administration could run to, it would be the First Circuit here, pretty progressive circuit, by the way, to try to combat that. But right now they're in a plane under control of the U.S. That means, we found this out in the Boasberg case, even though they tried to wriggle out of it there, means Murphy can issue an order. And that's what we're waiting for. We're waiting for two things now from Murphy. So headline number one is totally slaps him around, and, we advance the overall drumbeat with a real boom of the administration is lawless. And we're now waiting for two things. How exactly he's going to order. He says he wants to tailor it, be the least restrictive necessary, but how he's going to order them back, or at least one possibility is they get the sufficient hearing that they deserve, but there and in the plane, they get full notice, they get an attorney, they get an interpreter, they get to say if there's a reason under immigration law not to go to South Sudan. That's point one. We'll see how that works out. And point two is we'll see how it works out with this contempt that I think he's going to find, but we're going to have a contested, nuanced, complicated question of how do you enforce or punish officials of the United States for criminal contempt. And that's going to be showing up in various courts, and the administration is going to be poised to run to the higher courts and say, even if we violated, you can't do this to us, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we look for. But in the meantime, just know that this is the hearing in front of Murphy. He totally read them the riot act, and that's, the newest blow to the administration's lawless strategy. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.